Production support for In Focus is provided by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for Central and Southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. In Stride Magazine, Learn, Heal, Live, South Central Indiana's health and wellness magazine, featuring articles and ideas with activities for staying physically and mentally healthy. Inside the Herald Times, every second Monday, monthly. myinstride.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
In the midst of an economic recession, war, and developing international relations, the nation's hope may not be in the form of a monetary solution, but instead the philanthropy of the American people. What motivates these extraordinary individuals working to give back to their communities? Tonight we find out more as we go in focus on community service and volunteerism. Hi, I'm Ann Shea. We welcome our WTIU viewers and WFIU listeners to the show. And tonight we also welcome panelists from around the Monroe County area to discuss community service organizations and the volunteers who make a difference. If you have a comment or a future question, email us at infocus@indiana.edu and we'll try our best to address your comment or question on the show. Well, from a young 7-year-old girl to community residents reaching out through service, some corporations wouldn't exist without the assistance of volunteers. According to the Corporation for National and Community Service, Indiana's 1.5 million volunteers rank 11th in the nation for most hours donated. Hoosier generosity is making a difference not just here in Indiana, but in the international community as well. Here's one local girl's story, an example of what we'll discuss on tonight's show.
A once sad and scared little girl has a new twinkle in her eye and a new purpose in life for her peers and the whole world, taking on a fundraising and awareness project.
I would hope people would understand what it's like to have a parent with cancer.
The American Cancer Society estimates more than 1.4 million cancer cases a year in the United States affect individuals and their families. One of them is Camille Caruso.
I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer, and it was very aggressive.
Bella was just 5 years old when Camille was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in June of 2006. Bella needed an outlet to express her feelings and emotional support from others who were feeling
really sad
because they also had loved ones fighting cancer. Since 2000, Camp Kesem, a week-long summer camp, assists children whose parents have had cancer, currently have, or have died from cancer. Bella wanted to do more, so she started Templeton Kids Fighting Cancer.
because I want to help Camp Kesem and I want to help other people understand what cancer is and make them feel better if they have a parent with cancer.
Bella shows that you can make a difference at any age. Tonight, community service and volunteerism are in focus.
And joining me in the WFIU radio booth is News Director Stan Jastrzebski. Stan, give us an update on who will be joining you tonight.
And later in the show, I'll talk live in studio with Ivy Tech Bloomington Chancellor John Weikart, and I'll have phone conversations with former Indianapolis Mayor and now AmeriCorps board member Steve Goldsmith and National Head of Habitat for Humanity Mark Andrews. That comes up later. Right now, back to you.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Stan. Our first topic highlights community service and how organizations use volunteers. In fact, some statistics from the Corporation for National Community Service show on average, Indiana has 1.5 million volunteers with an average volunteer rate of 30%. Between 2005 and 2007, Hoosiers donated an estimated 215 million hours of their time to make a difference in the lives of friends, family, and even complete strangers. Well, joining me tonight is Dr. Beth Gaisley, Assistant Professor in the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University. Barry Lesso, Executive Director of the United Way of Monroe County. And finally, Elizabeth Betts Savage, Director of the City of Bloomington's Volunteer Network. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Let's talk first of all about those statistics that we just saw. Tell me, do you agree? Are they a little bit off, or is this where we're going in the state of Indiana? Beth?
Well, I think there's always good news and bad news with those statistics. Indiana does compare favorably with the nation. One of the things that concerns me about these volunteer rates, though, is if you look at the trends, the rate hasn't changed much over time nationally. So we can't rest on our laurels. We have to continue to work very hard to involve people, particularly young people, in volunteering.
Bet you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think Indiana is part of the heartland, so that says something, right? Also, we're not as people are not as overscheduled as they are on the coast, for example, where they just really have trouble fitting in the time to volunteer. Most people say, actually studies have shown that people find the time to volunteer by watching a little bit less TV. I don't know what you think about that, though.
Barry, I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, do you see that trend here in Monroe County with the United Way? Or?
Absolutely. Hoosiers are incredibly generous people, and that goes for all the people who live here in Monroe County and throughout South Central Indiana. We noticed, though, that about 46% of the people we spoke with who didn't volunteer mentioned it was because of time constraints. And so I think suggestions like the one Bet just offered are very helpful. We also noticed that about a quarter of nonprofit agencies in Monroe County had what they described as major difficulty in retaining volunteers. And about another maybe 40% said that they had some minor problems. So sometimes it's a matter of making sure that we are good at finding those volunteers and then supporting them. And that's where I think nonprofit agencies and relying on the services available at SPIA and at the Bloomington Volunteer Network have gotten much stronger about their ability to retain volunteers and make them comfortable in their setting.
Well, let's go on to that and talk about management. When we're talking about management of volunteers, what do we need to do better? And kind of add to what Barry said, Beth, if you would.
There is a high turnover rate. So there's something that's going right about volunteerism and volunteer involvement, and then there's some areas where organizations are letting volunteers down. So if you think back about the story about Bella, what is Bella getting out of that? She's getting a chance to act on, to work through a very difficult emotional situation for her. Every volunteer has a story. Every volunteer has some kind of need or expectation. And organizations can really do a great deal of good if they have very effective orientation processes for getting volunteers in the door, understanding how and where they want to be involved, and understanding how to engage them in a way that makes sense to them.
Let's talk about that engagement as well with the Be More Awards, Bet, if you would. Bella was a part of that as well. Why is that such an important part of this whole system?
Well, volunteers, it's very important to thank people that give, right? And so the Be More Awards are a way of celebrating the volunteers and the spirit of volunteerism in the community. 101 people and groups were nominated for the awards this year. That's really a record.
Yes, it is.
It's just amazing. That's 101 stories, 101 people and groups that have found their niche, and I think that's part of the equation in retention. It's also on the volunteers' side that they need to find something that is a good fit for them. Not to just say, well, I'm going to do this without even knowing what this exactly entails. I recommend to people that they try out a few different things. Before making a commitment, go to different orientations, learn about the services of those organizations, and see what's a really good fit for them. Then they'll be committed and want to stay.
And we want to mention that Monroe County, you could do that by going to the Volunteer Network, correct?
That's right.
And then if you live outside of Monroe County, where can you go?
We recommend people get in touch with their United Way or their community foundation, and normally those organizations, one or both, will have a list of volunteer opportunities and places to refer to locally, like we have our Bloomington Volunteer Network.
Right, yeah. At the Volunteer Network, we work with about 187 different organizations and have, maybe 425 volunteer opportunities listed on our website. And it's a searchable database, so people can make a profile and say what they're interested in. So we do recommend that people start there and look around to see what the volunteer needs are in the community, and then what their strengths are and their skills. So people can go to our website. It's www.bloomington.in.gov/volunteer. And they also are always welcome to call, and I'll walk them through.
Okay, great. We have more to cover in this show. Let's go over to the radio booth for more on this topic with Stan.
Thanks, Ann. We've got Mark Andrews on the phone. Mark is the National Head of Habitat for Humanity. Mark, my first question to you is, in the midst of an economic recession, is it harder to get people convinced that there are others who need help?
Outside the current economic crisis, we typically try to, as a part of our social justice work, let folks know that there are low-income families in need of simple, decent housing in every community. It doesn't matter whether you're in Beverly Hills or the inner city of Chicago. There is always a segment of the population that's unserved in terms of affordable housing.
Well, I mean, here in Bloomington, you've got poverty, you've got homelessness, and you've got committed social service agencies who are working to solve those problems. I'm curious which you think wins out. Is it the problems which don't get a lot of publicity around here, or is it those people who are working to publicize and to solve those problems?
The folks that are in the business of trying to help do eventually win out. Even the underserved, the silent underserved, eventually surface in some entity, in some organization across the spectrum. So it's not an easy process, and community development is not a very paint-by-the-numbers kind of process. Community development requires significant back and forth between the community that needs the services and the community that can provide those. It is not something that is linear. It takes time, and it's not without its challenges.
Mr. Andrews, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Stan.
Well, you know, the people that Mark Andrews was just talking about are often nominated for Bloomington's Be More Awards, which recognize people who sort of try to do more with less. And WTIU's Shamika Neely has a profile of just one such person.
A server at one local restaurant and bar does her part to give back to the community. For about 2.5 years, every third Thursday has been designated as an evening of giving back to local nonprofit agencies.
People who just don't have a lot of money but want to support a cause, they can give me $1, they can give me $5, doesn't matter. It's all the same, and every little bit helps.
Natalie says the average varies each month, but she just wants to assist the best way she can.
What we do is so little compared to what some of the volunteers, I mean, these nonprofits have to do fundraising, and they still are passionate about whatever cause they believe in. I mean, some of these people are just literally dedicating their lives to whatever nonprofit they're supporting, and ours is just a little tiny little thing, which is kind of the beauty of it too, I guess.
Some organizations would not exist if it weren't for dedicated volunteers like Natalie who make a difference. In fact, statistics show about 30% of Hoosiers volunteers who fundraise, while 20% mentor youth. Well, we now welcome one of Monroe County's most dedicated volunteers and a member of WTIU's Community Advisory Board, Lynn Schwartzberg, joining us again. Dr. Beth Gaisley and Barry Lesso, thanks again for being here. We saw volunteers like Natalie who pick the ones each month and she really does her part. Lynn, as a volunteer yourself, why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because my passion for a certain area of society, which primarily is the arts and culture, would not exist without the core of volunteers that drive those missions in every community in the country and probably around the world.
Now, as WTIU, WFIU, non-for-profit, I mean, we couldn't get by without volunteers like you. This is the economic impact of volunteers on organizations. What is that impact and how do we measure that? Beth?
Well, volunteers are responsible for the 1.5 million nonprofits, the civil society that we can't live without, because every organization has a volunteer board. From an organizational point of view, there are very few organizations out there that actually measure empirically the contributions that volunteers make, but there's some easy tools. You can find them online for actually estimating what kind of impact volunteers make on clients and on communities.
In terms of where we are right now in our economy, this is going to become even more important, Barry, right?
Absolutely. Their budget pressures are being felt by a lot of nonprofit organizations. There's a lot of organizations, especially those that are serving the basic needs, are seeing an increase in demand and in some cases a decrease in the supply of funding. They're relying increasingly on volunteers, and some of them have done just a tremendous job over time in building up a solid core of volunteers who work in direct programs, whether it's involved in mentoring or serving food, and those organizations are really, I think, going to be utilizing those volunteers even more fully in the future. Something we need to watch out for as a community that has somewhat of an academic schedule is the change in supply of volunteers, especially from Indiana University during the summer months and over breaks. And so community members and others who might find that they are seeking those opportunities that we were talking about might find this a great time to get on the Bloomington Volunteer Network website, contact their local United Way of Community Foundation, and find out what opportunities might exist in their community.
Yes. Lynn, you wanted to say something to that as well?
Well, not so much to the social services, but some of the things that truly, I know we're tired of hearing it, but that make Bloomington Bloomington are absolutely driven by volunteers. When you look at something like the Lotus World Music Festival in the fall, 500 volunteers are trained and recruited in order to put on that 3-day festival. I don't think anybody realizes, and they're trained and recruited by volunteers, as a matter of fact. So that's a year-long process, and they're things that give us the community that we choose to live in, so that we can provide good jobs, social services, all the other things. They're all part of building blocks.
Exactly, and also when you talk about the Lotus World Music Festival, things like Stonebelt, I mean, these volunteer networks are really basically, in charge or overseeing big budgets as well. Wouldn't you say that as well?
In some cases, yes. I'm on the board at the Buskirk Chumley Theater, and we have a very sizable budget, and we have to be very good stewards of that budget. Sure. I'm also in the City Arts Commission, which has a budget and tries to do things proper things with public funds.
All right, well, thank you so much. Let's now go over to Stan with more in the WFIU studio. Stan.
Thanks, Ann. I'm here with John Weikart, Chancellor of Ivy Tech Bloomington. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for asking me.
You bet. I want to talk first about the O'Bannon Institute, which you guys have done for a couple of years now, and you're able to bring some pretty big names, recognizable names and faces, to a relatively small campus. What does it mean to you to be able to do that, to tell your students that community service is something that they should be thinking about?
Well, time flies. It's actually our 6th annual O'Bannon Institute coming up the end of this month. It's important to us because as a campus, we have embraced the goal of civic engagement. We believe it's the mission of a community college. We believe that our students who, when they graduate, want to stay and work in our communities. If they leave us with a commitment to service to their communities, then we've done an excellent job as a community college. Our opportunity to bring in national speakers, local speakers. I know some of the panelists Ann's speaking with have been involved and continue to be involved in the O'Bannon Institute, to expose our students to ideas about service, the value of nonprofit organizations to our communities. We think it's invaluable to them, and we look forward to that again this year.
One of the constituencies that is always involved in community service seems to be the college students. What kind of numbers do you see for Ivy Tech students about how they're getting involved, how many people are getting involved, and what kind of time they're spending in the community trying to make a difference?
Well, we see it happening in 2 areas. One is our civic engagement goal, actually, we refer to it as a 3-legged stool. And the first leg is individual volunteerism, not only on the part of our students, but our faculty and staff as well. The second leg is service learning, how we incorporate community service activities into the teaching curriculum. And then the third leg, lastly, how we use our institutional resources, how we use our facilities in support of our community. We are seeing more and more students engaged. The first year, when we asked our faculty and staff to begin to record for us their volunteer time, we saw over 10,000 hours of time volunteered to our local community by our faculty and staff, and you can literally put a dollar value on that. The service learning opportunities we're offering through the teaching curriculum, we hope through both nonprofit organizations and faith-based organizations that have service missions to give something back to our communities in that fashion. So be it our accounting program students who do tax preparation work at the Crestmont residential area, a marketing class that's helping design marketing plans and brochures for nonprofit organizations. All those things add up. And most importantly, our students tell us in response to our survey questions that they are more engaged in their coursework as a result, that they feel more committed to their communities as a result, and those are the outcomes we're looking for.
And lastly, tell us, when does the O'Bannon Institute happen, and who's going to be here this year?
Well, it's actually a 3-day event, but April 30th is one of the first public events. We have Doris Kearns Goodwin, who's coming to the IU Memorial Union. It's a fundraising dinner. We sold out within a couple of weeks. On the Friday, the theme Friday is the first 100 days of the Obama administration. Eugene Robinson, who's a columnist and a regular guest on MSNBC, various programs, is going to be with us. I've told both of them that I have the opportunity to invite people I want to meet, so that's why they're going to be here.
Well, we'll look forward to it. John Weichert, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Back to you in the studio, Ann.
All right, thanks a lot, Stan. And once again, we have Beth and Barry and Bet with us. We're talking about the future impact and long-term impact of volunteers. I wanted to start personally first, if I can. What do you see, Barry, for those people that volunteer for a long period of time? What do you see them getting out of it?
Well, I think you have 4 people on the show today who have spent a lot of time volunteering, in some cases with the same organization for over a decade. And I think we see the commitment that we feel, but we see the opportunities that volunteering can offer to people. And so getting the right match, of finding that place where you're going to feel comfortable and you feel you can make a significant difference, really can make a tremendous difference to the volunteer, obviously also to the agency. People ask, how can I help? And we talk about something we call Living United. This is a nationwide effort and something certainly that's taking place in Indiana. Giving, advocating, and volunteering. Those 3 legs, just like as Chancellor Weichart talked about, the 3 legs at Ivy Tech, those 3 legs of helping the community are the ones that will make a tremendous difference for improving people's lives.
Okay, well, let's talk also about the future of these organizations and what they're going to need as our economy, I don't know, worsens or gets better a little bit. Bet, can you talk about that? What are we going to have to see from volunteers and volunteer networks in the future?
Well, over the long haul, the people that do commit the most amount of time are able to shape those organizations to be organizations that are doing the work that they believe in and that are, in some ways, manifestations of themselves. They are able to, for instance, the community organizations that we have here in Bloomington, most were started by volunteers, and they're continued by volunteers. One of the trends in volunteering is that people want to volunteer for shorter periods of time. They want to volunteer for events, and that's fine. That's a nice way to get into it, and to experiment or check out different organizations and where the fit is. But it's the people that commit over the long haul to put their hearts and souls into it that will make a difference as far as sustaining the organizations through this economic downturn.
Beth, I want to talk about the AmeriCorps program and how that's going to impact volunteerism. If you would discuss that and how it will affect.
Well, it's got bragging rights and being a program that's been supported by both parties, both major parties. So I think it's got lasting power. The Serve America Act that was passed last week is an authorization to increase substantially the number of AmeriCorps members. And in communities, we have some here in Monroe County, we have some in the region who provide essential services, often leveraging their AmeriCorps experience to bring in other volunteers and other resources for agencies. And that was the intent of the legislation, to have people who could really leverage additional community resources. Looking ahead, we have to look to whether we can afford an expansion of the program. There is one aspect to the Serve America bill that I'm very happy about, and that there's some funding in there for volunteer management capacity.
Okay, we'll get back to that in just a minute. Let's go to Stan now in the radio booth.
Thanks, Ann. I'm on the phone with Steve Goldsmith, former mayor of Indianapolis and national head of AmeriCorps' chair. He's the chair of the board of directors. My first question is, how much publicity do you think is necessary to get some action on these social justice issues?
Well, I think there is a problem to the extent that the issues of poverty tend to be, particularly in places like Bloomington, a little bit invisible. And I think Hoosiers respond well when they see and feel a problem. But if they don't see and feel the problem, there's obviously no tangible reason for them to volunteer. And communities like Bloomington that are more resilient than other communities in the economic downturn obviously do have that issue. On the other side, though, is that the ability to connect college students and graduates to service through tools such as those that are embedded on Facebook now is much greater. And the invisibility of the problem is an issue, but the new tools allow better matching of students with opportunities.
So when you're looking for solutions for some of these problems, what have you identified as some of the most important factors to do that?
Well, just a little bit of mentoring will help a kid from a tough community get out of high school. And so one of the most important areas now would be high school graduation rates. For kids from stressed neighborhoods, they're way too low. For young black men, they're really way too low. And so some help from a mentor or a tutor will make a big difference in that area. So we see substantial work there. We're beginning to look at how we can help with homelessness, including people who had been innocent renters in a house that's foreclosed, and they're now on the street. So some of the issues of mortgage foreclosure and the like. So generally the group of things that you would think would be the most obvious, in fact, are, but with maybe a concentration now on education.
Steve Goldsmith is the former mayor of the city of Indianapolis and now the chair of Board of Directors for AmeriCorps. Mr. Goldsmith, thanks for your time.
Thanks for the call.
Back to you in the studio, Ann.
All right. Thanks a lot, Stan. Dr. Beth Gaisley, as we end the show, we're going to recap. I really want to talk about the families and how families volunteering together really can make an impact. Is that right?
When we look at the reasons that people volunteer, one of the things that comes back in the research consistently is that people volunteer when they were raised in a family that volunteers. I come from a family that volunteered, and I've got 2 children and a husband who all volunteer. If we have to head to a board meeting, dinner gets rearranged. And I'm very proud that I have that chance to offer that experience to my children and raise them the way I hope they'll continue to serve in the future.
That sounds like great advice, and we thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
That's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks so much to our WTIU viewers and WFIU listeners for joining us for In Focus. And of course, our guest. Stan, thank you for your part in the show as well.
Thanks as always, Ann.
We're always taking questions for In Focus, and you can send us questions by going to infocus@indiana.edu throughout the month. To see portions of this show, just go to newsmatters.org. Next month, our topic is the environment. President Obama has a new energy plan and other initiatives to promote green efficiency. What does that mean for South Central Indiana? On the next In Focus. Have a great night.
Production support for In Focus is provided by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for Central and Southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. InStride Magazine, Learn, Heal, Live, South Central Indiana's health and wellness magazine, featuring articles and ideas with activities for staying physically and mentally healthy. Inside the Herald Times, every second Monday, monthly. myinstride.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you.